So let's start with the prayers as usual. Palden Save Lama Rinpoche Dagi Jivo Bende Den Shula Kadrin Chempa Gone Jesonte Kuzon Dujing Adub Sadu So Sanje Chudang Soji Chonam La Sanjo Badu Dane Chapsuji Dagi Jinso Jibe Sunamji Drola Penje Sanje Drupasho Sanje Chudang Soji Chonam La Sanjo Badu Dane Chapsuji Dagi Jinso Jibe Sunamji Drola Penje Sanje Drupasho Sanje Chudang Soji Chonam La Badu Dane Chapsuji Dagi Jinso Jibe Sunamji Drola Penje Sanje Drupasho Semjen Tamje Devadam Deve Judan Den Pajujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Dalwa Jujik Dungal Mepe Devadam Padang Mindalwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Dralwe Jempola Nepa Jujik Semjen Tamje Devadam Deve Judan Den Pajujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Dalwa Jujik Dungal Mepe Dewa Dampadang Mindalwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Dralwe Tonyom Chenpola Nepa Jujik Semchen Tamje Deve Judan Dempa Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Dalwa Jujik Dungal Mepe Dewa Dampadang Mindalwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Dralwe Tonyom Chenpola Nepa Jujik. So let's sit for a few moments, just developing, starting the session, starting the day with bodhicitta. You develop motivation, thinking of why you are practicing, why you are studying this text, and setting a firm intention of bodhicitta. As you know, bodhicitta means the intention to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And you can just sit and meditate and settle your mind for a few minutes. So, so good morning and good to see you all here for this continuation of the Nagarjuna's letter to a friend. And I realized that I was a little bit unorganized in terms of the dates for this course, so I think this date was added, right? Originally this date was not included, but so we included March. And then we've had quite a few people who've emailed to say they can't come today, so I think that's my fault, really. And then what I think you may be aware now is that the course has been extended. So there won't be there will be a break in April. Now we're March, there will be a break in April. And then we continue, we call it Module 2, the last module, from May onwards, but that is also a little bit disrupted because in July and August there won't be a class because we have a very busy month in July with Lama Yeshe Rinpoche visiting, and August we're closed. So it will mean there will be May and June, and then there will be September, October, November. Okay? So just so you keep that in mind, and all the dates are now up on the website. So from May onwards, if you could book again for the second term, if you want to attend the second term, then that's now up on the website. Just wanted to clarify that. So let's continue where we left last time. And well, first I want to just also briefly go over what we've done. So this text written 2,000 years ago, a letter to a friend, a letter to a king, a letter to a very busy person, a person who has lots of responsibility and lots of duties and lots of worries, lots of things on his mind. I think it applies perfectly to 21st century. All of you living in London, you have a lot going on in your lives. So this text that was written so long ago, of course, like all the Buddhist Dharma, it is relevant at any time, any century, any situation, but particularly it is said that because this teaching was given to a king and a lay person, it is particularly relevant for lay people. I think actually it's relevant for everybody, but from that point of view, we should look at it as this was for me. Nagarjuna taught this for me. This letter is for me. He wrote particularly with us in mind. And so it covers the whole path, as you know, from how to remain strong on one's own path, how to apply the teachings with determination, strong intention in terms of virtue, how to apply ourselves in virtue, how to really live a virtuous life. So Nagarjuna gave the king all of these different reminders of what he should avoid and what he should practice. General advice on practicing the Dharma. And then it embodies all the 6 perfections, which is the whole path of a bodhisattva, always covers the 6 perfections. So you can divide the text up in many different ways, and one way it is explained is as teaching on the 6 perfections, as covering the bodhisattva path, with a lot of emphasis on concentration and wisdom. So we are now in the wisdom, you could say wisdom chapter. And so we looked at the life of Nagarjuna, the title of the text, etc. And then we looked, and to a great degree there, we looked at patience. Patience, how we need to give up. So the way this text works is it shows us what we should give up, all the things that are incompatible with the 6 perfections. So in a way you might think, well, what has that got to do with patience? What has that got to do with generosity, etc.? But Nagarjuna is pointing out that these are the things we need to avoid, purify, give up, if we really want to be capable of practicing the 6 perfections. So we looked at all the things that are incompatible with bodhicitta and patience and looked at eliminating desire. We reflected on the anger, the benefits of patience. We reflected on the consequences of desire in terms of our own peace of mind or lack of peace of mind. And we reflected on contentment, benefits of contentment. We reflected on diligence, the consequences of lack of diligence. I think when we reflect, of course, we think of it in a personal way, my life, directly, not just words, not just things to memorize, not just things that we need to know, but in my life, what do these things mean? How do they affect me? How do they affect and influence my peace of mind and my own path, my own development, my own sort of stability, my own development of bodhicitta, all the things that are my own belief and my own holding on to a self, a sense of self, all the various aspects of the path. So we reflected on that, then we also reflected on the 8 worldly concerns, fame, infamy, pleasure, pain, praise and blame, those aspects in our own life directly, and how they are so deeply ingrained in our way of living our life, how we are often ruled by these 8 worldly concerns, and how they cause us so much stress. So we reflected on that in January, in February. That's last month, February. We reflected on the 5 elements, the 5 skandhas, aggregates, sort of contemplating the 5 aggregates. So now we are in the topic of wisdom. We are in the topic basically of what all the Dharma path is about, is discovering the root of ignorance, the root of our misunderstandings, of belief in a self, our strong belief in a self. So we got up until verse 49. So I'm not going to go through I did last time. I went through in more detail the framework of what we have done. But the wisdom aspect starts with verse 45. And we got up until verse 49, and we're going to continue again today with verse 49, because we went over it quite briefly, and it's difficult to get your head around. It's difficult to really follow. And it's difficult, I think, for us to analyze and to reflect. We're not very used to reflecting. As Kagyupa practitioners, we're used to maybe trying to sit and meditate. We don't think so much about the logic or the various approaches to this, analyzing form and self, and does the form, is form the self? Is the self form? Does self possess a form? Does the form dwell on the self? These aspects that we looked briefly on in verse 49, they're actually quite, I think, alien to many of us in the Kagyu tradition, whereas maybe Gelugpas, they go more into the analysis aspect. So let's start again then this specific explanation on investigating the self, this strong belief that we have in an I. I am, certainly I am. I suffer. I am happy. I want. I don't want. I like. I don't like. All of this. I is central to my sense of existence, to who and what I believe I am. So we all have a very strong sense of self. So according to the Dharma, we have a mistaken belief. We all got it wrong. This is the key aspects of our Dharma path, of our Dharma exploration and our Dharma understanding, is to come to an understanding of no self. This is the essence of what we're trying to do, because This wrong belief in a self is the cause of our suffering. If it was not a cause of suffering, then no problem at all. Fine, believe in a self. If it makes us totally happy, if there's no problems with it, of course, then that's absolutely fine. But the Buddha teaches us that this is the core. This strong belief in a self is what brings on all of the other aspects of suffering in the world. So individual, on a wider scale, when we look at the chaos in the world that is happening, and we think, now I think we all have a strong sense of the chaos that is happening in the world, and the Buddha taught us this is basically the root, is a strong mistaken belief in a self, which then gives rise to so much selfishness, clinging, grasping, fear and anxiety. And so the key point that we always say, the Dharma is like an arrow that points us to, from many different directions, points us to that essential key point of ego clinging. Ego clinging means my strong sense of who I am and what I am and my strong belief in that. So we need to look at that, isn't it? We have to try to analyze it a little bit. We need to chew this verse over a little bit in the next following verses. So that's what we'll try to do in this session here, and next session, because that's what the following verses are about. So it says, investigating the no-self of the individual. That's, how we come to wisdom, the wisdom of no-self, the wisdom of emptiness, understanding, recognizing non-duality. So Nagarjuna here says to the king, in his letter, he says, form is not the self. That's what the Buddha taught. And self does not have form, nor dwell on form, while form dwells not on self. Form doesn't dwell on the self. So there's these four aspects he's looking at. Says, thus you must see in the same way you should look at the four remaining aggregates, because they're also empty. Form is one of the 5 aggregates, 5 skandhas, 5 heaps. So here normally when you look at these, they just mention the first, form. But we're meant to look at all of the aggregates in the same way. Form, feeling, perception, impulse, consciousness. These are the 5 skandhas. And it's explained as this sense of self that we have is based on the 5 skandhas. Based on the 5 elements and the 5 skandhas. 5 elements and the 5 skandhas. That we have this mistaken belief that's who we are. We are the 5 elements and the 5 skandhas. This is what we identify with. We say this is ignorance, a mistaken belief in this solidity that is built up by, when we analyze it further, we see that there is actually no solidity there. There is no solid form, there is no solid feeling, independent feeling. All the different aggregates in that same way, perception, impulse and consciousness, they're all fleeting and temporary, and weave into each other in a very subtle way that creates and gives us a sense of solidity, a sense of who I am. So last time we did a guided reflection on the 5 elements, and maybe we'll do it again later, but first let's look at it again. That we see how this sense of a permanent, independently existing self, where we identify with I, me, I, and then mine, and then with mine comes attachment and aversion, and then that increases our sense of self even more. How it is, all of us, we are just this gathering of, well, maybe I shouldn't just say we're just this gathering, we're also Buddha nature, all the positive qualities, but that ignorance and mistaken belief in a sense of self is a gathering of these 5 elements and 5 aggregates that give us a sense, due to our fixation of them, and give us a sense of solidity. So it's explained that, well, you know, in terms of Buddhism, you don't negate the relative sense of self, the relative sense of self. Yes, we have a strong sense of self, but we are negating the mistaken belief in the solid, independent existence of that. So, briefly, let's look at the 5 elements and 5 aggregates again. So we got the earth element, our body. When we say form, the 5 aggregates is the 5 elements, right? Made up of the 5 elements. Form is earth, water, fire, air, and space is what we call the 5 elements. And they all interact with each other, depend on each other, interact with each other, create our bodies and also external things, any external form. So we're talking about our bodies and our any form. So that's very straightforward, 5 elements. Then we have, in terms of these 5 aggregates, say form appears due to causes and conditions. All visible forms that we meet, all these appearances that meet with the 5 senses, come about due to causes and conditions. So everything that is impermanent comes about due to causes and conditions. It doesn't arise just out of thin air, out of nothing. It comes about due to these different causes and conditions coming together, and but none of them have any substantial independent existence. But based on form, then you have the aggregate of feeling. So form arises, and then whatever is sensed or felt, like a radar, we can say our 5 senses are like radars. We have these 5 little antennas, and mind and body together enables feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, happiness, suffering. So in that sense, you say feeling is like a radar that gives us a sense of like and dislike. So based on form, we like something, we want it. Based on form, we dislike something, we're afraid of it, we don't want it. We run away from it. So we say that this skandha, or aggregate of feeling, is what ties us. A bond that ties us through our basic reaction of like and dislike. And we can see how we're continuously engaging and how we're continuously sort of living on feeling, creating feeling, striving for creation of feelings. We are sort of existing on this need for feeling. So anything we encounter through our senses, then the bond that links us with this form is feeling. But again, it's very fleeting and very temporary. It has no solid, permanent existence, right? When we say whether things exist or not, it means, are they permanent or not? Do they exist of their own accord? When you say something exists or doesn't exist, that's what is meant by it. Does it exist of its own accord, independently by itself, not due to causes of conditions? That means if something exists, that means it exists forever. It is permanent. So none of this, we can clearly see, it is impermanent, has no true independent existence of its own accord, right? Feelings come and go. We're aware of that. Arise, dissolve. And then the aggregate of perception, mental judgment as good or bad, beautiful, ugly, right or wrong. We're continuously judging, we're continuously labeling and judging whether something will fulfill me, my desire, or not. Will, something we want we want to run away from. So this is like a mental judgment, a perception, the next third of this mental judgment, that then creates craving or aversion, attachment, aversion. So then the fifth of these is the impulse. We say based on this judgment, then impulse happens, where we try to avoid the things that we find threatening, and also impulse to grasp. So we can see again how quickly this happens in our experiences, one after another. Sight, sound, taste, touch is this interwoven, very fast experience of the 5 skandhas, 5 aggregates. So impulse very quickly. Last time we looked at the examples of, say, fireworks. It's a form, fireworks happens itself, and then it's the feeling is when it's very loud, maybe something we like or we don't like. It's very loud and unpleasant, or maybe it could be also music. Could be very loud or it could be loud and pleasant, could be loud and unpleasant. And then the perception is that maybe it harms us. If it is very unpleasant, we develop aversion. And then the impulse is to react on it, to hide. If it's a bomb that goes off, or if you're in a war zone, you would hide, you would run away. In fact, fireworks sounds like a war zone, doesn't it? It has a similar reaction. We jump up and we rush, or we try to get away from something. It's frightening. So impulse is we take action. And this skandha of impulse, or sometimes called mental formation, I think the 5 aggregates are confusing because often different words and translations are used for the different aggregates, skandhas. But it said that this aggregate of impulse is what causes samsara. It says it's the architect of samsara because it's how we accumulate karma. Through impulse, through action. We act out our desire, we act out our aggression, our aversion. Very instantaneously. We don't really, unless we act with mindfulness. But it tends to be very quick, isn't it, in that sense of run and hide. You feel threatened. And sometimes that can be very useful, very important and helpful to have these on a very basic, ordinary level. Yes, we need to have this ability to judge and ability to run away and to protect ourselves. But here in relation to a strong sense of self, it is what creates is our continuous build-up, accumulation of karma, due to our actions based on ignorance, desire, and aggression, or attachment and aversion. Those feelings. So then the last of the aggregates is consciousness. Here consciousness relates to it's explained as quite a neutral but neutral aspect of mental activity connected to our 5 senses. So here we say we have form, and then we have the senses, and then connected what consciousness is connected to each of the five senses, and that is what enables us to experience. It's this but the consciousness connected to sight, sound, form, taste, and touch by itself is neutral. It isn't one thing or another. But it is also what enables us to sort of, through a filing system, enables us to know what is what, due to past experience. We know the past, present, future possibilities. So it's related, consciousness here is related to also mental activity, and also deluded thoughts, in a sense, that cling to the aggregates as existent. So it's all of that when we talk about consciousness. So it has different aspects. So here, say, if we are talking about the aggregate of form, then we can be conscious of the visual aspects of form. So consciousness is connected with seeing, with sight, external form, or our own body. So we have the visual consciousness, the ability to see. We have the consciousness of hearing. We have consciousness of tactile, touch perception, like tactile perception. We have the consciousness of taste, right? All the five senses. Smell. So in terms of form, all of that is what makes up form, right? Our experience of form. So we can have a positive experience through our perception, a positive experience of a form that we perceive through our visual consciousness, with our visual eye. So we need the form itself, the external form. We have the eye, whatever you call the eye itself, and then the perception of the form. And that could be positive or negative. We could label this as something we like, the feeling, something we like, something we don't like. And at the same time, of the same object, it could be, sound could be positive or negative, pleasant, unpleasant. Touch could be pleasant, unpleasant, we like or we don't like, create desire or aversion. Taste the same. Tactile perception, all of it. So we see like it is a mixed experience. And also intensity can be very different, can vary in terms of what we see and what we hear and touch and taste, etc. So all of these aspects will then also vary in terms of feeling and the other aspects of the five aggregates, of all the five, in terms of all the five aggregates. But we see here that what we call consciousness here is not a thing, but it's more like an experience. An experience that happens in relation to form and the various aspects of form. So, visual consciousness is a visual experience. Consciousness and has all these different interrelated functions. And so we see many things are going on in our mind at the same time. But we label it as I am, I feel, I like, I don't like. And it becomes a very solid experience that we all label under that conception. We all function under that conception that I am. I truly exist. The sense of I is definitely, continuously, permanently there. It's with me at all times. I walk, I sit, I talk, I sleep, I eat, I am. I like, I don't like. We're I want, I don't want, and then acting out on this. So the 5 aggregates here, in that sense of feelings, perception, impulse, and consciousness, is we say like many layers that give that strong sense of solidity, but really all of it is impermanent, but happening very, very fast and continuously, and then we identify with it. But so, by reflecting on it, we see that actually there is nothing solid there. It is all impermanent. All these different aspects are impermanent. And we see that what we identify with is more like, I think we looked at last time, like bubbles. All these different bubbles, all these different moments of experience. And that we, once we get a feeling of that, then we don't take them quite at face value. We don't take them quite so seriously, and which means then that also we don't suffer in the same way. So that's and this verse and the next verse is what Nagarjuna is talking about. Form as one of the aggregates, but he's talking about form and all the 5 aggregates. And I think in the next verse it's similar. The next verse says, the aggregates are not a simple whim. He's investigating the aggregates as a support of this sense of self. He says they don't come due to time, due to nature, they don't come just by themselves or from God or without a cause. He says their source, you ought to know, their source is ignorance, and they arise due to karmic deeds and craving. Ignorance, attachment and aversion is the cause of these aggregates, of what we sort of hold on to as a self, as a sense of self. So so, in terms of the verse, Nagarjuna says then, form is not the self. Says, he asks then, if there is a single self, is its nature that of the aggregates of form and the others, form, feeling, perception, impulse and consciousness? Does it exist as form? Is form the self? Or does it exist as something else? So he's here in the commentary, it says if the form, if the self was the same as form and the other aggregates, it would have to be impermanent and multiple, because form is multiple. Form, our body, if the self is the same as our body is made of many different things, 5 elements, hands, arms, legs, etc., 5 senses. So then the self would have to be multiple as well, and it will also have to be impermanent, because our form is impermanent. So these are things like we have to kind of think about it, yeah? And what I wanted to mention to you is that in terms of this other commentary, which is actually an excellent commentary, but here it's explained, like Geshe Zöpa, he explains that now that we are trying to investigate this self, or non-existence or non-solid existence of self, impermanence and non-existence of self, he says there are 3 ways to do that. There are 3 ways of valid cognition or valid knowledge that you use in Buddhism. One is simply perception. One is a valid cognition through logic. And one is through reliance on the words of someone with great wisdom, like mental powers and wisdom, like the Buddha. So there's three ways we would approach this investigation of, are the aggregates the self? Does this sense of self, that I definitely believe that I exist, I am because I suffer, and I am because I am happy, and I'm continuously giving in to this belief of a self. So we are obviously, clearly laboring under this strong belief of a self. So he says there's three ways of valid valid cognition. So perception. The first one is, with your senses, you can see something. It is clearly there or it is clearly not there. It is directly perceptible. You don't need logic to understand it, it's obvious. So that's the first one, straightforward. Second one is when you use this inference or valid cognition via logic to examine something. He says this is used when something is slightly hidden, and maybe that's what we need here, because we're not really sure this sense of self. How do we examine this slightly hidden up? So things that we don't understand with ordinary perception. We cannot see the self. We cannot say for sure, I can see the self, it has a form, so I can tell that it exists because of it has form. It has a clear form. We also cannot say it doesn't exist because it has no form. There's some ambiguity. It's slightly hidden objects. So this is used when things, we don't understand them through normal perception. They're slightly hidden and not perceptible to your senses, so you need to think about it. And here the example is, we can say that there is fire because there is smoke on the hill. This is a very common example, right? Inference through logic is on that hill there must be fire. Over there in that direction I see smoke, so there must be a fire there. We cannot see the fire, but we know that there's smoke. And sometimes here it's also, he says that there's hidden objects. Examples of hidden objects is things like time, space, impermanence, enlightenment. You cannot see them directly, but you can, through logic, you can prove some aspects of these things. So it says you can infer through logic that certain causes and conditions have certain results. Such as like farming, you plant a seed. If there wasn't certain results, farmers would not bother planting seeds and have a harvest. There will be a harvest if you plant seeds. And in terms of Buddhism, then past and future lives, they're in this category of hidden, using logic to infer that something either exists or doesn't exist, because it cannot be seen, but there can be logic to establish whether it is true or not. And then you talk about the third category is the very hidden objects, the last type of object of knowledge. And that is where it is so hidden that it can only be known by someone with omniscience, like a Buddha, someone who has wisdom, the mind that can see actually the nature of things. So in that sense, in that third category, we rely on, say, scripture, we rely on the sutras, we rely on the words of the Buddha. Of course, we do rely on the words of the Buddha. We do have faith in the words of the Buddha, and we must rely on the Buddha's speech as being reliable. The Buddha had that omniscience, and his speech is reliable. So here the example that is used of very hidden objects, where we use where we rely on scripture, is say, karma where certain karma creates certain results. Say past karma creates results in a future lifetime. Like we can observe karma in simple terms, here and now, that negative actions are the causes of suffering, and positive actions are the causes of happiness. We can observe the causes and consequences of karma in a simple, straightforward sense, but we cannot really observe the deeper level of karma and consequences in terms of past lives and future lives. So that is considered something where we rely on the omniscience of the Buddha, we rely on the scripture, we rely on what the Buddha said. We have to trust. So that is the third. And so here, these three types are mentioned here because when we analyze self, does a self exist or not? Selflessness. This comes into the second category as the slightly hidden category, that where we use inference with logic, we use recognition, and we use logic to think about and to try to prove it via logic that the self does not exist. So here it's explained that they are that the words themselves in the verse, the words in the verse are not proof. The words in the verse of Nagarjuna are analyzing through logic. We need to analyze is what Nagarjuna says. Form is not the self. Just saying that, we have to look at it. Form is not the self. The self does not have a form. It's not enough just to believe that, actually. This is something we need to look at through logic. And he has explained that there are two ways that something could, that a self, a permanent substantive self or soul or being could exist, is either it has the same nature as the aggregates, or it exists independently of the aggregates. So either the aggregates are the self, or the self is separate, independently of the aggregates that we just look at. Yeah? Outside, it exists outside, independently of the aggregates. So form, feeling, perception, impulse, consciousness is not the aggregates. Is not the self, or they are the self. This is what he's saying here. So that's why we start by examining, is the self the same nature as the aggregate? Form, Nagarjuna says, form is not the self. Is form the self? Am I my body? Why not? So, yes. So, yes, we can say no. We can, yes, you're right. But is that belief deeply down? Do we believe that? Do we act out as if this form, if this body is the self, is who I am? Deep down, we act and we live our life as if this is who I am. So by examining it, we come closer to genuinely recognizing it and giving up the attachment and the aversion that follows. Because if we genuinely do believe that this form is not who I am, we would not have so much attachment and aversion to it. We are very attached to our body. We are very attached to the feelings related to our body and all of the actions. So we have to investigate if a self is identical to the body, and think that if they were the same, then the self would be impermanent, the self would change as our body grows and ages. Our body has many parts, like we just looked at. Hundreds of hairs, different parts. So if the self was identical to our body, to our form, then we would also have to accept that the self is multiple. And that contradicts the view that the qualities of impermanence and being multiple, it contradicts our wrong view that the self of a person is independent, is unchanging, is inherently existing. Now we have to recognize that we are under that strong belief, even though we can logically agree with this, but we still act as though I am, genuinely I am, and these things are mine, and these things my things, I desire them, or I have aversion, etc. The whole sequence of attachment and aversion that follows on from that. Is this useful? Is this okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
So is consciousness different from awareness?
Consciousness in this sense, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There's something behind that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Here we're talking about consciousness as the five aggregates of, that is like a diluted aspect of mental activity. So this text goes into it in quite detail. If you think it's useful, we will carry on. I think it is useful because we never look at it like that, do we? We never really look at it like that. So Nagarjuna says, here, form is not the self, it's multiple, etc. He says then, goes on to say, self does not have form. Sorry, I have to get my notes in order. I had to kind of, to really get your head around it, I actually, when you look at it, when you really, in one sense, yes, it's straightforward, but at the same time, when you really look at it, it's not that easy to get your head around, at least I found that. So it says the self does not possess, does not have form. It doesn't possess form. In the same way as a person possesses cattle, in the same way as a farmer possesses his sheep. Let me find it here. So he says, in the same way as a person controls his cows, his cattle, his sheep, a farmer can keep them in the same place, he can corral them into that field or in another field, take them home at night, take them out in the morning, and they do whatever the farmer wants them to do. But the self has no control over the body. The self cannot keep the body from changing. Our body is changing independently of this sense of self. It ages, it gets sick, it changes color, all without any particular intention on the sense of the self, and any permission from the self. It declines, it dies, even if the self doesn't want it to end. So that type of dependency is not there. So it describes different types of dependency. The self does not possess form, the self does not dwell on form, like somebody sitting on a seat or on or somebody's a form that somebody who wears clothing, somebody who dwells in a house. Form does not also dwell on the self itself, like a creeper. It says like a vine or a creeper that climbs up a tree or is supported by the earth. It says that in the same way that creepers are supported by the earth, the aggregates. So the reasoning is that the aggregates do not dwell on the self, because the aggregates could never perish if they were totally relying on a sense of self. Do you understand that? Is that clear? It says the birth and destruction would depend on the self, and doesn't happen because one conceives of the creation and destruction of outer forms as occurring without a self. Like form does not dwell on the self. So, let me find it here in this one. So what is, it says what we're looking at here is the relationship between the absolute sense of self and the aggregates. Saying the self does not dwell in dependence on the physical aggregates because the body is impermanent. And if the self was dependent on the support of the aggregates, it would also be impermanent. And as the body changed, the self or the soul, sense of permanent self, would also have to change according to that. And if the aggregates, as we know they are transitory, if they relied on a permanent existent self, then the aggregates would never change or die either, which we know they do. And something that's permanent cannot give rise to something else. Something that's permanent never changes. Something that's completely permanent doesn't give rise to anything else, right? I have a feeling that all of you understand this much better than I do. You're looking like if there's no problem, there's no issue, you're completely clear about this. Totally. Of course it's like that. But if that's the case, then why do we continue reacting through these 5 aggregates and developing attachment and aversion? Why do we completely act on impulse due to feelings of attachment and aversion, if we really genuinely understood it? So what is said in this commentary here says most people do not examine this, but they have a strong feeling about it. So they do have this innate wrong view. Innate wrong. We have this innate wrong, strong belief. And even if we don't put it into words, you think, I am intrinsically existent. I exist. I am. I believe I am. I don't see myself as this continuous web of the five aggregates. I certainly don't experience that, and I may to some extent see how the attachment and aversion causes distress and problems in my life. But I still have strong attachment to what I think is mine. I have strong attachment to what I believe, what gives me pleasure, and what I feel, what I want. So I act according to this innate wrong view. I act based on the belief in the five, that I am the five aggregates. Feeling. I'm continuously feeding my feelings and looking for feelings of pleasure. That's kind of how the world exists, how society exists, is continuously feeding our sense of pleasure, developing pleasant feelings, what we eat, what we smell, new perfumes, essential oils, whatever it is, soaps, and all these things that we like, foods that we like, music that we hear, sounds that we hear, sights that we see, touch. Continual, our material world is based on that. And we are striving, in our life, we are striving for things, to have a pleasant life based on this sense of self. So even if we don't give it words in terms of how it's described here, we think there's a quote from Chandrakirti that says, first thinking I, they cling to a self. Then thinking mine, they become attached to things. It says, like buckets on a water wheel, they revolve without control, meaning we're driven by this constant striving. This is what creates samsara, is this constant striving or this constant chasing of towards pleasant feelings and attachment, and running away from the things, the opposites. So this is, they say, the water wheel turns. The water wheel of samsara turns based on our involvement with these five aggregates, because of feeling and then perception, and the impulse that creates the action is that the buckets on the water wheel, the actions are continuously making the wheel turn. So he says here that this wrong view is the true target of our spiritual practice. This strong clinging to a sense of self. And then he says that with mindfulness of this, then we develop the wisdom that destroys this process, with mindfulness and awareness, through our practice. So we are encouraged to think about it. Nagarjuna is encouraging us to think about it and to look at it and to examine it, but also through our meditation and this strong approach in the Kagyu tradition of, say, the Mahamudra lineage of practice, of observing the mind through mindfulness and awareness, we will come to see that clearly. That is the aim, is to come to clearly see through this mistaken view of a belief in a self. Do we have to know that that is, whichever approach we come from, that is the goal, that is the target of our spiritual practice. That is the target of our meditation, of our mindfulness, of our awareness, is to dismantle the wrong view of the belief in the self. The wrong view of the belief in the five aggregates, which we all experience, whatever approach we take, whether it is the very studious and logical path or the meditative path. So it says that this is what yogis work on, and they use many methods to come to understand that there is no real, solid, independently existing self. And they reject this clinging. So it's explained as it is not, they don't negate the conventional relative I. On a relative level, we need a sense of self. On a relative level, we need to have fear of the things that, or at least aversion to the things that hurt us and harm us, because otherwise we would not survive. On a relative level, we need that ability to function in society and to function in the world. So the yogis do not negate that conventional relative sense of self, but they reject the wrong belief that clings to something that does not exist, that clings to something as real, solidly existent, solid, permanently existent of its own accord. But it doesn't. So they reject that wrong belief. Yeah? That then causes all the other aspects of suffering. So emptiness is explained. This emptiness is the lack of an independently existing self based on the aggregates. It's a understanding. So understanding of emptiness is understanding of this how the identifying with the aggregates is a mistake. How identifying with this web of the aggregates and seeing them as a solidly, independently existing self. How that is a mistake, and that is ignorance, and that ignorance is. And wisdom is the understanding of that, and ignorance is that mistaken belief. So Dharmakirti says, suffering is the samsaric aggregates that suffering arises in accordance with transient causes, independent causes. So he's saying that suffering is caused because it is temporary, because everything is temporary, because things are temporary. It arises, comes and goes, depending on conditions. And so, if a thing was not temporary, it would always exist. So this idea of existence or non-existence, something that is temporary, depending on causes and conditions. It depends on causes and conditions. And here he's explaining that the aggregates and then the suffering that arises out of the aggregates is relative, it's temporary, it's dependent on causes and conditions. The aggregates look like they're permanent and independent, but they're not, because they all arise due to causes and conditions. They don't exist as an absolute independent self. So that's how he explains verse 49. So I think we need to reflect on it. Maybe next session we can do some reflection, a little bit of reflection on it, because I think that's what this verse is about. Really relating it directly to our own situation. So we leave it there. This is the break time. tam che se pa ne top ne nye pe danam pam che ne che ga na che ba la thuk pa ye se pe so le do wa sho shang chu sem chu rimpo che ma che pa nam je jo chik che pa nyam pa me pa dang con e con tu pel wa sho pal den la me sha pe den pa dang ka nyam yong la de se jong wa dang ta shen ma le so sa de jane nyo do san je sa la ge ba sho. Oi palen sa ve lama rinpoche da ge ji wo pen de den shu la ka den chen pa gon e je sun de ko sun du ji nga du sa du so san je che dang so ji chu nam la san ju ba du da ne chao su chi da ge jin so ji be su nam ji tro la pen je san je du pa shu san je che dang so ji chu nam la san ju ba du da ne chao su chi da ge jin so ji pe su nam ji do la pen ji san ji du pa shu san ji che dang so ji chu nam la san ji ba du da ne chap su chi da ge jin so ji pe su nam ji tro la pen je san je du pa sho sem chen tam je te ve ju dan den pa ju jik dung a ji ju dan jal wa ju jik dung al me pe de wa dam pa dam min dal wa ju jik nye ring cha dan dan dal ve don yom chen po la ne pa ju jik sem chen tham je de wa dang de ve ju dan den pa ju jik dung a ji ju dan dal wa ju jik dung al me pe de wa dam pa dam min dal wa ju jik nye ring cha dan dan dal ve ton yom chen po la ne pa ju jik sem chen tham je de wa dan de ve ju dan den pa ju jik dung a ji ju dan dal wa ju jik dung al me pe de wa dam pa dam min dal wa ju jik nye ring cha dan dan dal ve ton yom chen po la ne pa ju jik. So now let us do a reflection, analysis, reflection on these 5 elements and the 5 aggregates, like we did last time. So please just sit in meditation and settle your mind first of all on the breathing, and the right motivation and on the breathing. Let go of thoughts, past, future. Just settle into the present moment. So first we reflect on the 5 elements. Spend a few moments reflecting on how everything is composed of the 5 elements. Our body, things external to us. Think of how we depend on the elements. Food, clothing, shelter, the environment, our health. So we depend on the elements for everything. Externally, and also the elements make up our own body. So reflect on the earth element. Externally, it's the ground we walk on, the solidity of all things. And then internally, it's the firmness and solidity of our body. So focus mainly on the earth element of your body. So define the earth element within your own body. And then think of the water element. Externally, the lakes, the rivers, the oceans, the rain. We're very familiar. Then internally, all the fluids in our body, the liquids. Identify the water element within your body. And then you think of the fire element. Externally, real fire, heat in all its many forms. And then internally, the heat and the warmth in your body, the digestion in your body. So identify the fire element in your body. You can identify it, you can feel it actually in your body. And think of the air element. How externally it's the wind blowing, the movement of the air, any kind of movement, actually growth in nature. And then internally we inhale, we exhale air. We also have movement within our body, changes in the body, our own growth. So identify the air element in your body and try to feel it and be aware of it. And the space element. So externally, the sky, space everywhere. And internally, the spaces in your body, the spaces that make it possible for other elements to exist, try to identify the space element in your body. So reflect on how all these elements depend on each other and interact with each other, forming our bodies and all external things. Think of how we all look different, but we all composed of these 5 elements, but we still talk about my body, your body. We protect our body at all costs. We fixate on our body. Basically, it's made up of these interacting and constantly changing elements. So we go to the toilet. We are flushing our own body down the toilet. Think of that. So this is the aggregate of form, these 5 elements make up the aggregate of form, and all the variations of the things that we see and sense, all visible forms and appearances and shapes come about due to this, all these many different conditions or, variations of all the elements. But they don't have a solid, independent existence. This is what we have to see, this lack of a solid, independent existing form. But it is continuously changing. So reflect on the aggregate of feeling, feelings. So whatever we sense, feel, pleasant or unpleasant, happiness, suffering. So try to recognize this skandha or aggregate of feeling as the bond that ties us through or recognize, try to analyze, reflect on this, our reactions to form. It ties us through our reaction of likes and dislikes. When we come across anything through the senses, through our five senses. We see, we hear, we taste, we touch, we smell. And then this creates a basic reaction through this aggregate of feeling. Again, when we look at it closely, we see it is impermanent, fleeting, transient, has no true reality, no independent, solid existence of its own. Nothing we can identify with to say this is who I am, because it is constantly changing. We can easily see how our feelings are constantly changing. So where is the I in this aggregate of feeling? We can notice when we have strong feelings, there's a strong sense of I. Strong feelings of sadness, strong feelings of loneliness, strong feelings of fear, or strong feelings of pleasure, strong feelings of desire, strong feelings of anger. There's a strong sense of I. But it's all fleeting and impermanent and temporary. So where is this I? Then you have the aggregate of perception, or sometimes called mental judgment, or recognition, or appraisal. So where we have a mental judgment of whatever we experience, so mental judgment that leads to craving. This might please me, this might harm me. This is beautiful, this I don't like, this is good, this is bad. And as a result of this, we keep craving what we find pleasant, and we have aversion to what we find unpleasant. But because of our assessment of how much happiness or suffering things bring to us, because it's ego-centered, it brings us more afflictions. And it reinforces our sense of self. So we judge something, we develop craving or aversion, and then with that strong feeling of craving or aversion, there's even more stronger sense of ego and self, clinging to self. So reflect on how that works in your own experience. Then consider the aggregate of impulse, or it's also called mental formation. Mental formation, impulse, this impulse to jump into action, impulse to take action, based on our desire or our aversion. We try to avoid what we think is unpleasant, try to get what we think is pleasant. So this mental formation is concept that's related to our experience. And it's an impulse to take action on the basis of our feelings. And then that leads to more accumulation of karma, more strengthening of a sense of self. Which is why it says this is the architect of samsara, because action accumulates karma. So again, think of it in your own experience. How we act according to our judgment and our feelings and our impulse to take action. Think about the difference between having mindfulness and not having mindfulness, being mindful and being unmindful in relation to these skandhas. Being aware, being present or not. fifth of the aggregates is the consciousness. So reflect on consciousness, this here we could say the deluded mind, or deluded aspect of the mind. It's deluded thoughts that cling to the aggregates as truly existent. And also the different aspects of consciousness here in relation to the five senses. So sight, sound, taste, touch, etc. Think of how it's changing all the time. We don't see how quickly it changes. One moment we're focused on sight, another moment on sound. We don't focus on both at the same time. And the intensity varies from moment to moment. So constantly flickering from one experience to the next. Consciousness also refers to the past memories, future possibilities. Organizing all the bulk of information that we have due to past experiences, present experiences. But recognizing that, so now recognize that there's nothing in itself that we can identify as being real and unchanging and solidly existing. It's like a flicker of continuously changing experiences. Like when you have a film made up of many different reels, a reel is made up of many different photos, it makes it seem like it's continuous. So all these experiences that come and go, if we start to see things as less solid, we don't take things so personal, so seriously, we don't get so caught up, we don't fixate. We don't fixate or increase our own problems, our own misery. So if we start to see the more transparent quality to all of this, then our confusion about this sense of self gradually becomes more and more transparent, or our sense of solidity becomes more transparent. Confusion dissolves in relation to this, less fixation of attachment and aversion. So it's said that wisdom, at least the beginning of wisdom, is a dissolution of this clinging and this confusion in relation to a sense of self. But also just knowing it is not enough. We need to, with awareness, with mindfulness, we need to change our habits through application and practice and contemplation, reflection. So we start to see we can't base our lives purely on feelings, on emotions, fleeting moods, fleeting experiences. We need a better foundation. We need self-awareness, stability, mindfulness, understanding, wisdom. And we can start to see that the quality of our lives depend on not being so fixated or believing so strongly in these fleeting feelings and experiences. Not giving so much value to them. So instead we need to have a foundation of mindfulness and awareness. So now to end this, we try to sit in meditation and just without reacting to sensations, don't label whatever arises in your mind, whatever appears in the mind. So be aware of what appears in the mind. See it all as these fleeting bubbles, fleeting experiences, but don't react, don't label, just let things flow. And be aware that whatever arises in our minds is not a big deal. It's just another bubble. We can't rely on it like bubbles. They appear and they dissolve. Instead, just rest in awareness and mindfulness. So in a sense, what we're really trying to rest in is this awareness and emptiness, because there is nothing else to really rely on. Everything else is continuously changing. So rest in this clarity and awareness and let things flow. Be aware of subtle feelings and just let them go. Okay, so I had some questions here, but for now I feel like Nagarjuna can explain this much better than I can. I might mislead you all if I answer too many questions, but maybe we'll get to questions later. Let's look at verse 50. Verse 50. Yeah. So verse 50, again, investigating the aggregates that are the support of the self. So Nagarjuna says, the aggregates are not a simple whim. From neither time nor nature do they come, nor by themselves, or from God, or without a cause. Their source, you should know, is ignorance. They come from karmic deeds and craving. So he says these aggregates, they don't arise randomly or from time. So here Nagarjuna, he's rejecting a different, he says different schools hold different views, he says incorrect concepts about the cause of the aggregates. And so he says, first he says they don't arise randomly just like that, on a simple whim or wishful thinking, with no dependence on outer conditions. They're not a result, it says, of their own fanciful thinking, because they arise from causes and conditions. We can see that feelings are sparked off by certain things. Form arises out of conditions coming together. All the different aspects happen because of something else. So then he says they don't arise from time. Now these are different schools. He says the eternalists, a school called the eternalists. I think maybe this doesn't relate so much to us directly, but eternalists claim that there's no, they would claim, he says, there's no time that's independent of causes and conditions. Since a result cannot be produced from a permanent entity, they do not happen from transformation by, maybe I don't. No, he simply says they do not arise from eternal time. Since there's no time that is independent of causes and conditions. Okay? So here he's refuting the view that all the causes and conditions arise from time. Independently of causes and conditions. So then he says also, they do not they don't have a permanent nature. A result cannot be produced from a permanent nature. So they do not happen from transformation by a single permanent nature, because a permanent nature cannot have a cause and transformation into something else, and it would not be permanent. Okay? Does not happen by itself, by themselves. The aggregates do not arise by themselves, because it says a fruit cannot be produced from a seed without the seed being altered and without depending on conditions. So they do not happen by themselves, as the Mimamsakas hold, the view of the Mimamsakas. So it's a different school that holds a different view. I think non-Buddhist school. They also do not come from, it says, by God. This is another school, Nayayika school, that says they arise from God or Ishvara. And also they do not come into being without a cause. There's a different school that believe that. Because he says if they did arise without a cause, they would either have had to have been there all the time or never ever be. So then he says, what do they come? How do the aggregates arise? What do they come from? So Nagarjuna says, just like a shoot is produced by watering a healthy seed covered with manure, you should know that the aggregates arise from powerful karmic actions covered by unknowing, by ignorance, and moistened by craving. So watering with craving, and the manure is like ignorance, covered by ignorance. So due to craving and ignorance, he's saying their source, you should know that the source of the aggregates is not knowing. And due to this not knowing, there's these karmic results through action and craving. Okay, so I think we'll go quite quickly over that. So verse 51, he goes on to say, so these, the actual path, so he says, talks about the obstacles that are incompatible with the path, the obstacles that prevent us from finding freedom. He talks about 3 obstacles now. Finding freedom and understanding this no self. So here Nagarjuna says, to believe that one is ethically superior, to view one's body wrongly and doubt. With these 3 obstacles, you should understand, or with these 3 fetters, you should understand that the way through freedom's city gates is blocked. So know that the 3 shackles binding you to samsara and blocking the gate to the city of liberation are clinging to asceticism as a superior practice, having a wrong view of yourself, and doubts. These three obstacles are what prevent us. It says prevent us from finding freedom. So there are many, many obstacles. We know that there are we need to purify lots of aspects of the mind, right? But here he's honing in on 3 things we need to abandon. So he says that even though there are many, many obstacles that stop us from getting to our destination and freedom from suffering, there are 3 that are the main ones. One obstacle is we don't want to. We don't want to go. We don't want to leave samsara. We've seen that in other texts as well. Renunciation, lack of renunciation is key aspect, key obstacle. So we don't want to. Second one is even though we may want to go, then we take a wrong route that leads somewhere else. And thirdly is even though we want to go and we have been shown the correct path, we dither and we hesitate. And we think maybe this isn't actually the right way to go after all. So the first one here relates to just strong clinging again to a sense of self-cherishing attitude, where our clinging to a self and our involvement with what we like and what we want is very, very strong. So the temporary pleasure, I mean, it might sound like, Buddhists are not allowed to have a good time, we're not allowed to live our life well. It's not that, it is like the clinging and the grasping and our strong belief in this as a way to happiness is faulty. And if we are so ruled by that, he says we want to continue with that. We think, we win the lottery and our life will be there happy forever and ever, and everything will be fine. So we don't consider even that this view might be wrong and we might get into trouble. We have no interest in anything else than simply pursuing our own desires. We forget to look about how impermanent things are. And so that stops our wish to find freedom. Then the second one, he says, is even if we have some level of renunciation, we might have some right view, but we don't understand the method. We have a wrong understanding of the method. So we go astray. We don't find true freedom from suffering. And then the third problem is doubt. We might have the right view, the right method, but we are not completely sure what to do. We hesitate, so we don't engage with the path, and then more obstacles arise from. It says that out of these three, many more obstacles arise. So here, like Nagarjuna says, ethical superiority, where we believe that our practice based on wrong views lead us to liberation. And also where we regard our body as like the aggregates as a self, so we have a wrong view of the aggregates. This is like wrong view of our own body, and then doubt. So we're in two minds, okay? So in this way, saying we meet a lot of obstacles on the path. We have no wish for liberation, we lose our way, and we are torn by doubts as to the path, confusion, and that way we have obstacles. So this is the verse 51. Then after that, Nagarjuna goes on to talk about diligence, the favorable conditions, and also talking about trainings needed on the path. So we'll look at that in the next session. Now I think that there's many questions that could be asked here. It says, I actually had a little bit of difficulty reading this. So yeah, let's leave this for now. I think that is longer questions. We'll stop here. All right. Let's do the dedication, and we come back at 1. Now we have lunch break 1 till 2. We come back at 2:00. Sunam de tamje sepane topne nyepedanam pamjene jegana jebalab tukpaye sipe sole dowa dolvasho Changjo semjo rinpoche Maje panam jejo jik Chepa nyampa me padang Kone kondu pelva Sho palen lame shape padang Kanyam yong la de shi jong wadam Ta shen ma lu so sa te jane Nyo tu san je sa la ke ba sho. I think I'll read you these questions as far as I can. It says, as the Heart Sutra says, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. For me, it is easier to see the interconnection of everything, the interdependence of everything, and that everything is made of many different things, cause and conditions. In that logic, nothing exists, not even Buddha or Dharma. So about reincarnation, the mental continuum carries the karma and the clinging to what we see as life and myself, etc. So we have a new birth, one of the 12 links. So is this mental continuum empty too? Yes, I believe it is. Is it beginningless? It is not, or it would be eternal. This mental continuum could end with enlightenment, right? Yes, yes. Is Dharma Dhatu beginningless? Is it beyond emptiness? So, these are very difficult questions because I think the Dharma, it talks about being, like in the enlightened state, being beyond existence and non-existence. It's beyond beginning, beyond end. So, it says, what is your opinion on these points? I don't think I should give my opinion because I think it's very big questions, but really I think it's, when you talk about the enlightenment, it is beyond all the extremes. So we cannot even talk about it. We can talk around it, but we cannot say what it is or what it isn't, because it's none of these things. It's beyond a beginning and an end. It's beyond all form, beyond all concepts. So, but this mental continuum would end with enlightenment, right? Yes, if we live our life according to like the path of purification, the path of accumulation of merit, these two things is what enlightenment means, right? Purification and accumulation. So then the mental continuum would end with enlightenment, but only if that happens, if we do apply ourselves in terms of purification and accumulation of merit. That's why we say accumulation of merit is so important and purification is so important. In order for that to happen, to come to that final liberation of being imprisoned within the aggregates and causes and karma causes and conditions. Until then, we are caught in a cycle of karma, like impulse, this, aggregate of impulse and feeling and the 5 aggregates. Until we can purify that clinging that arises out of that, and we are caught in that cycle when we eventually purify that, then we can exit from samsara to this only emergency exit that there is in samsara. One emergency exit only of non-duality. Non-duality, isn't it? Like until we are able to, until we realize non-duality, we are imprisoned within that cycle of 5 aggregates. So let's carry on in the next session. Have a nice lunch. Enjoy your lunch. Have a lovely lunch. So we'll start with the prayers. Paldenza Lama Rinpoche Dage Jiu Pene Denshula Kadren Chembe Gone Jesonde Kusun Dujing Rup Sadu Sa Sanje Chudang Soji Chunam La Shangju Badu Dani Chab Suji Dagi Jin Soji Pe Sunam Ji Drola Pendje Sanje Drupa Shu Sanje Chudang Soji Chunam La Shangju Badu Dani Chab Suji Dagi Sunam Jin Drola Pendje Sanje Drupa Shu Sanje Chudang Soji Chunam La Shangju Badu Dani Chab Suji Dagi Jin Soji Pe Sunam Jin Drola Pendje Sanje Drupa Shu Sem Chen Tam Je Deva Dang Deve Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Jin Judan Delwa Jujik Dunga Mepe Deva Tampa Dang Mindalwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Dalve Danyom Chempola Nepa Jujik Semjen Tamje Dewe Dyodan Denpa Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Dalwa Jujik Dungal Mepe Deva Tampa Dang Mindalwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Dalve Tonyom Chenpola Nepa Jujik Semjen Tamje Dewe Judan Denpa Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Dalwa Jujik Dungal Mepe Deva Tampa Dang Mindalwa Jujik Nyering Chadan Dan Dalve Tanyom Tempola Nepa Jujik. So let's sit for a few minutes, developing the right motivation of bodhicitta, and you're settling the mind for the session. So we'll continue in this text, Letter to a Friend by Nagarjuna. So he looked at investigating no self, ego clinging, seeing how ignorance, how we live our life based on ignorance and a mistaken view. And so in these verses, Nagarjuna is telling the king to investigate. Investigate, where is this self? Is it within the 5 aggregates, within the 5 elements? Can we find it anywhere? Can we find anything permanent within this that supports our general belief that I am, I exist, this sense of self that rules our life? So that's the 2 verses. We spend quite a lot of time on that, because I think they're quite important. Then he goes on to talk about the actual path to practice this, the actual path to make this understanding stronger. And he looks at the last verse we did was the three obstacles that we experience and that are hindrances on the path. So he talked about the hindrances, the 3 aspects of mind, the 3 beliefs and mindsets that are incompatible with the path. And then now he goes on to talk about the favorable conditions for the path. So now continuing on, we are looking at the actual path. Is first he looks at the obstacles, now he looks at, so what do we need? What are the qualities we need for the path? So that we can really bring forth this understanding of no self and find freedom from suffering. So he says in verse 52, freedom will depend on you alone, and there's no one else. No friend can help. So we bring endeavor to the 4 Noble Truths with study, discipline, and concentration. So he's talking about diligence being a favorable condition. So another translation says emancipation or freedom, it's the same, depends upon you alone. No one else can do anything to help. So endeavor to pursue the 4 realities, 4 aryas for Buddhas, through learning, morality, and concentration. To bring, he's saying, we need to be diligent in our study of the 4 Noble Truths, in our practice of the 4 Noble, our understanding of the 4 Noble Truths, in all aspects of the path, of our Dharma path. Without diligence, we won't really accomplish very much. Like when you look at the 6 perfections, diligence is one of them. And diligence is what it says is like the engine. Is the engine that makes us able to traverse the path. The engine that makes it possible for a car to move from A to B. Without the engine, it would just be an empty carcass, an empty shape. So without diligence, we won't get very far on our spiritual path, trying to gain a result on the path. And he says it depends on you alone. Nobody else can really do it for you. Not even the Buddha could do it for us. Friends, relatives, supports of many kinds. It really just depends on our own application, our own inspiration, our own intention. If you remember, we've looked in the past at the importance of having a strong intention. A strong intention is what makes us apply ourselves, put it into action. Diligence. So developing a strong motivation and a strong intention is extremely important for us to gain a result on the path. We really need to want to do it. We really need to believe in it as well. We can see why it's such an obstacle to have doubts, because with doubts, we're not sure. We don't really believe in it. And so if we don't really believe, we don't apply ourselves. We don't embark on it. We don't throw ourselves into it wholeheartedly. We need to, not give in to doubts and hesitation, and instead to have that strong intention of saying, if I really apply myself to something, I know that I will get a result. And with diligence, or meaning we have to have this strong interest, strong inspiration for it, a real strong trust, faith in it. We can see why trust and faith is so important. Without trust and faith, we're sort of like just dithering, and maybe this, but maybe something else, or maybe something else. There's so many different options in our lives. So the trust will come out of our own experience, out of study. So you say study, discipline and concentration, right? Study, conduct and concentration. Also you say Zangmo, the study and the reflection and the meditation. We need to apply ourselves in all of that, and then we get a result because our understanding grows. So the more understanding we get due to ourselves applying ourselves, diligently with learning more about the teachings, thinking about them, reflecting about them, not just like it says, let it go in one ear and out the other, be like a sieve, and the words just go through, and we hope that something sticks. We think that just by sitting in the shrine room, it will happen. But we actually are meant to, digest it all. We are meant to assimilate the teachings. And so it becomes our own experience. That is Zangmo. So the more we do that, the more our faith and our trust and our belief in the teachings will grow, because we feel the result directly. We feel our own inner stability growing, our inner confidence in ourselves and our own potential grows, our faith and trust in our own abilities and what we can do and what we're able to do and what our true potential is. So in terms of Buddha nature, all the qualities that arise out of Buddha nature, all of these things will come and grow stronger and stronger. Our trust in all of that goes stronger and stronger, so our doubt dissolves. We don't have hesitation and doubt. We don't get so distracted by so many other things that are there. It's a very organic process, you could say. Very wholesome and healthy, organic. Is that the right word? Organic process? Organic, organic vegetables, organic. So wholesome growth. It's not blind faith. It's something that's very genuinely rooted in understanding. That's the faith we need to develop. So here Nagarjuna is telling us, put in effort because you will benefit. Pay attention, you will benefit. It's good for you. Maybe it takes a little bit of, sometimes with effort we feel like we have to go uphill. We feel like it's a little bit of a struggle. Going uphill is not always so comfortable. We're sweating and struggling a little bit. But once we get uphill, then things become very smooth. And we just roll downhill the other side. So it may be that our diligence, our efforts, initially, we will have to push ourselves a little bit. Effort. We may not always feel like it. We may not always want to. But then we have to remind ourselves of the benefit. Remind ourselves of why we are doing it. Remind ourselves of, if I do this, if I practice, I apply myself, I will have the benefit for the rest of my life. I will develop inner stability. I will be able to cope with whatever comes my way, any obstacles that I experience. My own current difficulties will become less and less and less. They will diminish, they will fall away. I look back on it and think, oh yeah. And then I will understand why other people maybe go through difficulties like I do now. In the future, I look back on it and think that, yeah, it was difficult, but because I applied myself, I made such big changes. I changed totally from who I thought I was, and whatever I thought my obstacles were, they turned out to be, surmountable, even if at that time they may have seemed insurmountable. So like that, we need to remind ourselves sometimes in order to be diligent, to apply ourselves, remind ourselves of why we're doing it and the benefits of doing it. So cultivate the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, because that's what the Four Noble Truths is. Understanding of, the difficulties in life and how the mind works and how we get ourselves tied up in a knot and we do it to ourselves, and how we can undo that knot. That's what the Four Noble Truths are about. In a very simple way. And then, of course, tying ourselves up in a knot, we can say that's samsara. And untying that knot is freedom from samsara. Freedom, you can call it anything you want in terms of freedom from, anything that is free from suffering. Whether we call it nirvana or liberation or enlightenment or the awakened mind state. But that's what it is. It's total purification of all our hang-ups and our limitations. Total purification of our limitations and total coming into their full of our qualities. That is the potential we all have by applying ourselves on the path. And that's what the Buddha tells us. That's what the Four Noble Truths are about. Whether we say we become Buddhas, because that seems like so far, we're going to have a top knot, we're going to have a thing here, we're going to have long arms, we're going to have all the signs of a Buddha. I don't think the Buddha actually looked like that. If you met the Buddha, probably many people never knew he was the Buddha, right? You say Devadatta was jealous of him. Other people thought, well, yeah, he's got a sort of a shine. He's very charismatic. He's a very charismatic person. But apart from that, nothing much. So some people did not see the Buddha as the Buddha. So he obviously didn't look like that. They are symbolic signs of his qualities. So we say, I become a Buddha. But it means freedom from suffering. And by applying ourselves step by step by step, we can see a change. We can genuinely see a change from the time you meet the Dharma, when it gives you a real hope and possibility and positive outlook of there is some way of dealing with whatever I'm experiencing. And what we experience is different at different times in our lives. It's not like we're always in deep, intense suffering. But life is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. There is loss and gain, and we lose our loved ones, and we get sick, and all these things happen. We get old. We lose our youth. We cannot sit in meditation anymore. Whatever you think is hardship. Those things come. So, from the moment we meet the Dharma, we have answers, we have methods, and then we need to become skillful in applying those methods. We need to, like anybody who learns a new skill, in the beginning we are not very skillful. The beginning we are quite blind, we're quite unaware. And then when you look back, it's kind of shocking to see how unaware you were, how unmindful you were in the past, how crude one's behavior was when you think of when you were young. And so our mindfulness increases, our awareness increases, our understanding increases, our confidence increases, our stability increases. Our clarity increases. And with all of that, all these hindrances, they fall away. That's how it works. Hindrances are not solid anything. They are like this, what we saw, they're bubbles. We're just sitting here bubbling away, bubbling, and taking it all to be so We're so fascinated with the bubbles. It's like we're blowing soap bubbles. When we try to meditate, our mind is all over the place. We are blowing soap bubbles and we are thinking one thought, daydreams, and they're just like soap bubbles. They're so fascinating and so beautiful and colorful, and we are completely entranced by our own daydreams and our own involvements and our own attachments. And then with a feather duster, you go poof, 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 and they all just burst into nothing. So we don't want to live our life just blowing soap bubbles, right, all the time. And that's what we need, diligence for that. We need the favorable conditions to develop this freedom. He says, freedom will depend on you alone. Don't rely on the future. Don't rely on something happening to you in the future that will make it possible. You only have now where you have met the Dharma, now where you're engaging with the Dharma, now when you're here with the mind and you can actually observe what is happening and you can develop mindfulness and awareness. There's nothing else than that we can rely on. So here, Nagarjuna is saying, do really engage with what you have now, because it will be so good for you. It's like having the medicine, having the best medicine, having a fully stocked medicine cupboard, having a pharmacy in your back room. That is what the Dharma is. We have the full pharmacy. We can take any medicine. We don't take it all at the same time. You would never take all of the different kinds of medicines all together, right? You have to take them for the right condition, for the particular. We have a cold one moment, then we get a stomach ache in a month's time, or we have break a leg, or we did break a leg, or we have all kinds of difficulties with our body. And so we take different medicines according to what is needed. So similarly, in terms of the Dharma being a medicine for the mind, different times in our life we need, maybe we need more diligence at certain times in the beginning, maybe more diligence, because maybe later on the diligence is there like naturally. In the beginning we need to push a bit harder. When we have a hard time, we have to push a bit harder. That's what Akam Rinpoche told us in the retreat. When you have a hard time, just a little bit more effort, then you get over that hump. So just a little bit more effort, a little bit more diligence, a little bit more strength of intention and purpose. And then you just cut through that. And then that's how we become skillful, isn't it? Like in the beginning, we are not so skillful. And so by applying ourselves over the years with the Dharma and with the training of the mind, our mindfulness increases. We become more skillful in letting go. We start to see quickly that, all I have to do is just let go. All I have to do is just stop my grasping at all of these bubbles. Stop my involvement with all these daydreams and ideas. And then actually, right here now, there's nothing wrong. There's absolutely everything's perfect as it is. So we need to apply ourselves so we can become more and more skillful. Then eventually we can become a Buddha. Eventually we can become, free, totally free. But we can certainly, along the path, we can experience a gradual increase in our freedom. It's not like from darkness to light, from one thing to another, like that. Awakening into bright lights and rainbows. It's a gradual increase of our skill, our mindfulness, our skill in turning ourselves back onto the right path. Our skill in letting go of thoughts and daydreams that are really not good for us and that lead to actions that are not good for us. So that's where we have to be diligent. We have to become skillful. Not hard diligence, pushing ourselves to the limit, but skillfully guiding ourselves along the path. And again, that's something we can only do ourselves, because we know, we are the ones who experience it, isn't it? There's nobody else who can, I mean, on a rough way, yes, but not, ultimately it's ourselves. Ultimately, we are riding in that saddle, and ultimately we're the ones going to get thrown out of the saddle or stay in the saddle. So, we need to study, we need to have discipline, is like right conduct, also like knowing what is right to do, what is wrong to do. So in that sense of being skillful, yeah. What is right way to think? It starts with our thoughts. So more awareness of how we think, and then seeing what kind of thinking is good for us or not. How did that depression start? Not that Buddhism is just about, it's not like an antidepressant, we don't use the Dharma as just an antidepressant, but still, we learn to see how the mind, when we become depressed, it's just because I was thinking very dark thoughts. I was thinking either depressing about myself, or about others, or my situation, or my life, or my health, or my job, or others, but it was me thinking dark thoughts. So that's where we need to become more skillful then. The moment you start seeing these dark thoughts arising, come back, it's just thoughts, it's just bubbles, it's just like you have that ability to be diligent in your awareness and your mindfulness of how we think. And that's how we develop and how we practice, and that's how we gain benefit. So both in the meditation and outside of meditation, both in post-meditation, in all aspects of our life we need to, like Dharma is not separate from who we are. Dharma is not separate from any aspect of our life. If you think it's about clinging to ourselves, it's about ignorance, attachment, aversion, our actions and all of that. It's not as if Dharma is just on the meditation cushion or when we are reading a Dharma book. Dharma is every aspect of our life. So post-meditation and formal meditation. So then Nagarjuna goes on to say, in more detail, like discipline, wisdom, superior mind, train, the three trainings. Train always in superior discipline, superior wisdom, and superior mind, so superior concentration. It's sort of continuing in the same theme. Study, right conduct and concentration. Ethical conduct, higher wisdom and higher concentration. It says that these trainings, these three higher trainings, they contain everything we need in order to gain freedom from suffering, in order to attain this freedom, in order to attain this emancipation. So it means this superior discipline, avoiding whatever is harmful in the body, speech and mind, starting with our mind. So again, this idea of bringing yourself back to the path. Speech, avoiding what is harmful speech, avoiding what's harmful in actions, and practicing the positive, of course. So giving up the negative actions, practicing positive actions is a key to this superior discipline or ethical conduct. Ethical conduct means non-harming. Non-harming. That is what the Buddha taught. Don't harm yourself, don't harm others, to the best of your ability. And in superior wisdom, say understanding of no self, non-duality, seeing through this clinging to a self, seeing when we are suffering how this is all about me. And actually this me, I haven't been able to find it anywhere. Everything is impermanent, everything is transient, everything is constantly changing. So why build up? Why do I continue to build up this solid, hold on to this solid sense of self? And superior concentration, all the different levels of concentration on the path, so gradually we're improving our meditation. Like before I said, trying to really, when you meditate, try to really make that effort to be focused when you are on the cushion. When you are really meditating, that should not be the time when you sit and allow yourself to drift. That should be the time when you are really being diligent, as Nagarjuna recommended in the previous verse, diligence. So if you bother to sit down, then you should also bother to be diligent in terms of your concentration. Then you will have the benefit. And they said they are called superior because their function, their purpose is to take us to that freedom. This freedom will depend on you alone. So that's the function. So we need to make that effort. And that's in these three areas. In 54, Nagarjuna says, "My Lord, the Buddha taught close mindfulness of body as a single path to tread. Hold fast and guard it well, for all the Dharma is destroyed by loss of mindfulness." Awareness, mindfulness, mindfulness of body, mindfulness of what you are doing, mindfulness of your actions. Here also it relates to that. So in all circumstances, whatever you're doing, so sitting, walking, standing, lying down, mindfulness should be part of our natural state of mind. So mindfulness is being present, mind and body together. Not heavy-handedly watching yourself, but mindfulness becoming a natural way of being where you are present. You're not caught up in some mental distraction or chatter. So here it says, there's a quote from the sutras, one of the sutras, it says, "O monks, the path that purifies sentient beings, that takes them completely beyond suffering and happiness, that makes them understand the correct way, and that makes nirvana manifest, is this: close attention to the body, to mindfulness of the body, because our body is our anchor. Our body is our present anchor in this life, our home in this life. And so it is there as a natural anchor for us, just like our breath is a natural anchor. So when you say mindfulness of body, it can be all these things. It can be mindfulness of the breath and meditation, mindfulness of movement, walking meditation, mindfulness of actions in all your different activities. All of it refers to like mindfulness of the body, because it means we're present, we're here now, in rather than distracted past and future. It says the lack, Shantideva said, the lack of mindfulness and introspection that follows the loss of mindfulness. The lack of introspection that follows the loss of mindfulness is a thief who steals all the merit you have accumulated. And you will have to go to a rebirth of suffering. So he's saying we need mindfulness and we need introspection, like recollection, just keeping an eye on ourselves. Am I on track? Am I mindful? Has my mindfulness lapsed? You say that introspection, a kind of checking on yourself. So introspection is what makes sure that you don't lose mindfulness. And here Shantideva was saying that when we do lose both introspection and mindfulness, then all our merit is lost. Because we act, like when we act without mindfulness, then we tend to, it's based on desire and aversion, and so karma, negative karma is accumulated. We don't automatically sort of yet go for positive thinking, positive speech, positive action. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it's not like we all, but still it is based on ego, a lot of it. So here he's saying that you should guard mindfulness. You should really and be careful not to lose your mindfulness. One key reason we're meditating is to strengthen our mindfulness, be more and more present. Because he says if you do that, then all the merit we accumulate through practice and virtuous actions will be destroyed. Then he goes on to talk about impermanence. Impermanence. As part of this. So, reflecting on the impermanence of life. Verse 55. So here it says, 55 is about meditating on impermanence by reflecting on the unpredictability of the time of death. So like the four thoughts. First you start thinking about death and impermanence, later on precious human life. So it says here, with all its many risks, this life endures no more than wind-blown bubbles in a stream. How marvelous to breathe in and breathe out again. To fall asleep and then awake refreshed. How marvelous, because it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that we will awake the next morning. He's saying life is so unstable. It's as unstable as a bubble in a stream that is blown by the wind. And we should recognize, we should be grateful to be alive, because the only thing that separates us from this life and from the next life is one breath, is our breath. How amazing to breathe in and to breathe out, to breathe in and to breathe out, to breathe in and breathe out, to fall asleep, to be awake the next day. Isn't this one of the contemplations by His Holiness Dalai Lama? And I think Lama Yeshe Rinpoche put out something similar. Say we should be so grateful to be alive. We should be so amazed that we're still here, because there's so many obstacles that could have cut our life short between yesterday and today. How many things could have happened to cut my life short? Because it's so unstable, like this water bubble. So many different types of harm, like causes of death, sickness, accidents. Both, all kinds of elements, instability in the elements, say, from the Tibetan medical point of view, Tibetan medicine, good health is when those 5 elements are stable and balanced as they should be. And sickness is seen as an imbalance of these 5 elements. The 5 elements that, like we in the Western medicine, we don't think really of our body as a conglomeration of these 5 elements. We think of the liver, the heart, and intestines, and the brain. And this is a different way of thinking. It's not like this, it's bad, but it's not that that's wrong, but it's the Tibetan medicine has this direct recognition of that's what our body is. It's just 5 elements. And that is what health is, and that is what sickness is. Sickness is an imbalance of these 5 elements. Like a common imbalance is called the lung imbalance, wind imbalance. We have too much air. Our lifestyle has too much wind. We drink too much coffee. We're up late at night looking at computers, working till late at night, and sleep is up, upside down. Diet maybe not so good. So then these imbalances happen, and where the mind becomes very, very busy, mental activity very, very busy, but not being grounded in the present moment. This is the kind of thing that they say creates lung imbalances. And so then they have different remedies with also applying the different elements and heat and cold and herbal medicines and diets, heavy foods or light foods. That all will help to bring that balance back. But so these things are what can cut our life short very quickly, isn't it? So here he's just encouraging us, think about that. Think about impermanence. Because if we think about impermanence, then we make the most of the present moment. That's the consequences, isn't it? When we are aware of how impermanent our life is, we really try to make the most of what we've got. There's another quote saying, impermanent are the 3 worlds like autumn clouds. Watch how beings live and die. It's but a dance. A person's life is like a flash of lightning in the sky, or like a mountain torrent that rushes swiftly on. That's how we should think about our own life. And he goes on to say in 56, reflecting on the inevitability of death, of our own death. He says, this body ends as ash, dry dust or slime, and ultimately shit. There's no essence left. Consumed, evaporated, rotted down. So you should know its nature like that. It's like that. It is to disintegrate. So I'm glad you all have the text there. It's not me using funny words here. So really he's describing that when our time is up, that's what happens to our body. Just the last weekend, I was carrying half of my brother's ashes to Samyeling. The other half is going to Sri Lanka. So we were placing, myself and we were placing his ashes by the stupa in Samyeling. I think this is his body is reduced to that. That's what happens to all of us. Ashes, our body becomes ashes, dry dust or slime if it's in the ground, and ultimately shit. Like there's nothing really nice about this body that we can think of. However it is, whatever it's reduced to, I guess mostly now is ashes, isn't it? Cremation is the most common thing. But there's nothing left, no essence left. by the time the last breath is gone, that's what's left. The 5 elements are there, but there's no life, that person is gone. It's so clear when you see a dead body. So we should know the nature of this body is to disintegrate. The nature of our body is impermanent. It will disintegrate at some point or another. So, eaten by animals, I guess that's what it means when it becomes like, it says ultimately shit means somebody else might eat it if we bury it in the ground, or if we offer it to the vultures in Tibet, or however, whatever we decide to have done with our body. Consumed by fire, it has no essence. It's reduced to just the dust of the ground, broken down, rotted away, swept away by water, whatever. So then, he goes on 57, reflecting on impermanence by reflecting on other aspects. So the ground, Mount Meru, and the oceans too will be consumed by 7 blazing suns. Of things with form, not even ashes will be left. What need is there to speak of us, a puny, frail person, our body? But even Mount Meru and all the oceans, the universe as we know it now, will disintegrate eventually. We're talking about long times. We're talking about, eons and eons, not just thousands of years, but eons and eons. Eons is like a whole universes are broken down, reformed. To Mount Meru, the center of the universe, all things are impermanent. So don't think too small. So don't think that it's such a big deal even that our body is impermanent. But even Mount Meru and all the oceans of the world and our planet as we know it, our universe will disintegrate. We are just a little speck in all of that. Tiny little speck. But we still have all that potential to do good. And we have potential to do bad. One person can do an enormous amount of good. One person can do an enormous amount of harm. So our actions carry consequences, huge consequences. And however we look at it, we have to keep coming back to deal with the consequences. We have to continue to deal with the consequences. So now that we have the opportunity, we should really do our very best to apply ourselves with diligence, with a study, contemplation, right conduct, reflection, all of these aspects that Nagarjuna is saying. He mentioned, because it's all impermanent, it's all, and don't let that depress you. It's not a depressing message. It's just a fact of life, how things are. Everything is impermanent. Pleasant is impermanent. Unpleasant is impermanent. Good is impermanent. Bad is impermanent. Everything within this relative experience we have is impermanent. Only the ultimate level is beyond karma, beyond all of that. So in itself, impermanence is not something to become depressed about. It's something to wake us up to the fact that we have limited time and not to take things for granted also around us, because not only are we impermanent, but everything and everyone around us is impermanent. Our friends are impermanent, our enemies are impermanent, world rulers are impermanent. There's nothing there that is going to last. So for that reason, think about that. Nagarjuna is saying, think about that to the king. Even though you're such a powerful person, you're the king of this country, you have all the power in the world, still your body is going to end up as ash, dry dust or slime. There will be no essence left. So wake up from these ideas you have of grandeur and strong beliefs in who you are, and really make something of your life to develop this freedom from suffering. So this is the point where we'll stop, because then the next part goes on to talk about using your human life. Now that we know its impermanence, it continues about both in a way like the four thoughts comes here in the middle of the text. So this is, I think, a good point to stop, and I wanted to maybe use the next, we have a little bit more time, that we could focus on this called 9-point meditation on death. I think it's more useful than you asking lots of questions, because I don't think I can probably not answer your questions very well. So let's do that. Meditate on these 9-point meditations on death. There was just one question, and I'll read out. It says, I am not my form. It says, am I my awareness? And it says, is my awareness different to the Buddha's awareness? So, our awareness is different to the Buddha's awareness in that our awareness is not clear, it is polluted, it is not pure. Buddha's awareness is pure. As long as there's duality, it is impure. But then I guess you have to find who you are. You say, I'm not my form, am I my awareness? Maybe that's the closest we can come to saying, who am I? The awareness, the level of awareness that we have, I think is the closest we can come to say, what am I? What is the mind? Say the mind is wisdom, compassion and power, the mind of a Buddha. The mind is fearlessness, but that is the ultimate state. And on the relative level, it is all these different experiences that we have. But that is not the pure nature of mind. So, let's meditate on this 9-point meditation on death. Please settle into just resting your mind in the moment. Focus for a few minutes. So this 9-point meditation or reflection on death, it says it has 3 root truths, 3 reasons for each truth, and 3 conclusions. 1 conclusion for each of these 3 truths. The 3 truths, 3 root truths, you could say, is death is certain, the time of death is uncertain, and nothing can help at the time of death except my Dharma. 3 root truths, and then each one of these gives 3 reasons that we consider, and then the conclusions is I have to study, I have to practice, I have to meditate, I have to be diligent. So first now reflect on this fact that death is certain. First root truth is like that. You think, so I'll give you the key, then we sit for a few moments and we go on to the next. You think, Death is certain because no one has ever lived forever. My parents, my ancestors, their parents, previous generations before them, they've gone. No one remains. And soon it will be my turn too. So just reflect on this root truth that death is certain. So we think about the reasons why this is the truth that death is certain. The three reasons that we consider is that no one has ever escaped death. Like everyone has to die, no one's ever escaped. So it's the first reason. People in the past lived, they were happy, sad, lost, gained, finally they died. And whether they were wise or powerful or rich, that didn't change that fact. And there are billions of people on the planet now, and in 100 years from now, most of them will be dead. So consider this as a reason why death is certain. And the second reason is we're constantly coming closer to death. So because of the flow of time, minutes, hours, days, and years, we're moving closer to our own death. Like a train that never stops. Whether we go slow or fast, the train never stops towards the destination of the end of our life. So that's the second reason why death is certain. So third point, is more like a point, it says there's not much time to practice Dharma, to focus on Dharma. So we consider the fact that the best way to prepare for death is spiritual practice, because only the mind continues after death, only the mind can help us at the time of death, and only spiritual practice benefits the mind. So what am I doing to prepare for death is what we need to consider. And then the conclusion is that we need to work. I need to work on my mind. I need to develop a positive, stable mind. I need to, that will help me now, that will help me at the time of death. And then conclusion is that we should be optimistic that we can change. Be optimistic that your life is meaningful, it's not wasted. So then the second of these root truths is that the time of death is uncertain. First was that death is certain, but now the root truth is the time of death is uncertain. So consider this, the fact that we don't know when our own death will be. The fact is that we will die, but we don't know when. It could happen any time. So consider the fact that some people go to bed, but they die before they wake up. And some people go to work, they die before they come home. Some people start a project, they die before it's finished. And some people start a meal and they die before it's finished. So consider, why are we so sure that death will not happen for a long time when we know that many people die every day? So then we think of the three reasons why the time of death is uncertain, or the lifespan. Yeah, the first reason is that the lifespan of human beings is not fixed. Meaning that whether we're young or old, we could die at any time. It comes as a surprise to most people. But life can end at any time. Some people die as children. Some people die before their parents. Some healthy people die before those who have a terminal illness. Every day thousands of people die, so there's no certainty we will have a long life. Because of this lifespan is not fixed. And you consider the second reason why the time of death is uncertain is that there are more conditions that endanger life than support it. So there are many, many conditions that endanger life. There are many, many causes of death. So you think about all these different causes, potential causes and conditions to shorten the life. Such as external causes, accidents, natural disasters, floods, and other people, poison, animals, and in internal causes. Could be physical issues, sickness. Medicine that normally would support life could also be a cause of our death if we get the wrong medicine. Even food can be a cause of death. Wrong food, bad food. Food we cannot tolerate. Houses that normally give shelter can also become a cause of death. So think of all these different potential causes of death, and that there are so many causes, potential causes. So that's the second reason why the time of death is uncertain. Then the third reason why the time of death is uncertain is that our body is very fragile. So consider this, reflect on the fact that even a few days without food or water makes us very weak. You know, the Nyungne practice that is done in Samileng every Losar, you don't eat, you don't drink every other day, your body becomes so frail, so weak, just from going for 24 hours without water. And small infections, sicknesses can cause havoc in the body. So think of times when you have been ill or injured and recognize that how frail the body is. Even if we look after it well, it is still not very strong. And in the conclusion we come to by considering this, is that I must practice the Dharma now. So we need to develop a determination and positive attitude, because now we have the opportunity to do something very meaningful, very helpful for ourselves by studying, reflecting on and practicing the Dharma. You can consider like what would be important to you at the end of your life that you to have achieved. If you were to look back on your own life, what would be important to you to have achieved in your life? And you can consider what sort of mind state would you wish to have at the time of death or near the time of death, because often at the time of death we are not conscious even. But as you come closer to death, how would you wish for your mind state to be? And also, what mind state would you wish for your loved ones that you leave behind? And you recognize that if you suffer less at the time of your own death, they will also suffer less. So your own mental stability will help those around you, your loved ones. And then you think the third of these root truths, the three root truths, death is certain, the time of death is uncertain. The third is that nothing can help at the time of death except my Dharma practice, my spiritual practice. So consider this. Consider the reasons for this. The first reason it gives is that my wealth won't help me. So even if you reflect on the fact that even if during your life wealth and possessions occupy a lot of our time, then they're no use at the time of death. We can't take it along. So we should use it for beneficial purposes, to create positive imprints, to create positive virtuous seeds. Of course, wealth can help to get medicine, food, education, but it cannot provide peace of mind. Whereas if we have mental stability, faith, compassion, kindness, non-attachment, patience, tolerance, it will help us at the time of death. So we should become familiar during our life. So consider how wealth and possessions cannot help us at the time of death. Second reason is that friends and relatives can't help. Even though when we have difficulties, our mind turns to our friends and relatives, but it's not certain even that they will be with us at the time of death. Sometimes also loved ones can be a hindrance. Their sadness, their worry makes you sad, and so you spin downwards together. But actually we go alone at the time of death, so we should let go of attachment and holding on to friends and relatives. Instead, develop acceptance and loving kindness to all beings. And the third reason is that the reason is given that nothing can help at the time of death except Dharma practice. It says your body, that we put so much importance on our body. Your body cannot help you at the time of death. our constant companion. Now we will be separated from it. All the elements, 5 elements, will disintegrate. And so we recognize it's more important to take care of the mind than the body. And it's important to reduce our attachments, both to our body and to all external things. And also realize that being afraid of death in itself is not very helpful. Being afraid of death might wake us up to the fact we are going to die, but we don't need to be afraid of death itself, but we should be afraid of dying with a negative mind, with an unstable mind, with a mind that regrets how we lived our life. That is more consequential, that is much more serious. So then the conclusion of this is that I must practice the Dharma purely. I must develop awareness, live my life wisely and meaningfully, develop acceptance of impermanence, non-attachment, develop positive aspirations to make my life meaningful while we can. So we make that conclusion with a positive mindset that we are capable of practicing positively in that way. So with that you finish the meditation with that optimistic thought that you have every possibility to live your life meaningfully, beneficially and positively. So that then we can die with peace of mind. So we finish like that, yeah. So then Nagarjuna has one verse which is a summary of all of that, summary of all these previous verses. It says, verse 58, it's all impermanent, devoid of self. So if you're not to stay there refugeless and helpless, drag your mind away, O king, from plantain like samsara, which has no core. So he's telling the king that because everything that has form is impermanent, and all the aggregates are impermanent, there's no self to be found anywhere. So there's no refuge in all these things. So he says to the king, don't help yourself. Don't be so involved with things, don't be so involved with your own attachments and samsaric involvements. He says, plantain like samsara, like a plantain, like a banana plant. It's hollow in the center. So he says, like that, samsara is hollow. It has no core. So you should develop a sense of renunciation by recognizing that all things are impermanent and that there is no self to be found in the aggregates, there's no refuge to be found in samsara. So stop looking, he says, stop looking for substance in samsara, in all these external things. Instead, look for it within. Find your own refuge within. That's what he's telling the king as his last verse. He says, samsara is without S. This constant striving, chasing after things we want and running away from the things that we don't want. This samsaric struggle is just exhausting and tiring, so you should look inward. So this is where we're going to stop now. After that, he starts with talking about finding freedoms and advantages and the precious human birth. And so we don't have a class in April. Next class, if you want to continue this course, starts on the 16th of May, but please sign up for it online so we have a sense of how many people are coming. As I said, 16th of May, then also in June, no class in July and August, then September, October, November. So in June, Rinpo Rinpoche will be coming. He is teaching on he's teaching on a Monday evening not a Monday. He's teaching on a Tuesday evening and a Wednesday evening. So we will be open that Tuesday evening. I think it's the 23rd and the 24th of June. It will go up on our website soon. It's not up yet. 23rd and 24th of June. And then, of course, Lama Yeshe Rinpoche is coming. He's here for 2 weeks in July, but it's mainly 2 busy weekends. Gelong Tupten will also be here, and Lama will be here. There'll be more Sangha. And so July is quite busy. So I thought maybe better not to have a class in July. And we finish there. So we finish on the note of impermanence. I hope I see you again. I hope we're all still alive in May. Yeah. And I hope you have a good spring, because now it's springtime. Everything is coming out. Sun is coming out. Daffodils are coming out. The birds are coming out. New beginnings, positive feelings. So don't get depressed by this meditation, please. Don't get depressed. You should think impermanence is my refuge. It is it's my savior. Impermanence is what helps me in so many different ways, recognizing things are impermanent. And that is the pathway to understanding no self, to understand emptiness, which is the real freedom from suffering, to understand non-duality. It enters through this assimilation of impermanence. So it's a very wonderful teaching. It's not something, you should not see it as something dark and terrible and depressing. Like the consequences of the more you meditate on impermanence and the fleeting nature of all things, the more delighted you should be. Each morning you wake up and you're still alive, okay? So let's do the dedication and we finish there.
Sorry, can I interrupt? I don't know if I can say, because not everybody has the recordings for the teaching. So can I tell them while we're all here that they can email the office if
Yeah.
they haven't received them?
We only email them if people ask, because we will only email them if people have told. So you're correct, yeah, Simon, about the recording. So my feeling is most people are not going to listen to the recordings. So because it means you have to sit for 3-4 hours in front of a screen and listen to the Dharma teachings. I honestly, maybe I'm being pessimistic about that, but that's why I said to Simon, well, if people ask for the recordings, yes, we will send you a link to the recordings. If you couldn't come, if somebody could not come, if somebody wants the recordings, you can definitely get the recording. But we're not just sending them out, we're not chasing you with, now you must watch the recordings, because if you want them then, and if you're going to listen to them, I'm sure it will be, you will email the office. So we'll leave it like that. Does that cover the message?
Yes, because a couple of people asked why they haven't received the recordings. So I told them that they need to request it. We're not sending it, it's unlisted. But if they want it, they have, I don't know.
Yes,
I didn't say
no, that's
everyone.
correct. Simon also mentioned something, so I forgot. And yes, so it may be that there are some people, some of you have entered later, some maybe they don't have your details in the office, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's also why it's important to sign up. But please, if you want the recordings, feel free to just email the office and you will get them. That's kind of clear, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Sanam de tam je se pa ne top ne nye pe danam pam je ne je ga na je bala tu pa ye se pe sole do wa do wa sho san jo sem jo rempo je ma che pa nam je jo chik che pa nyam pa me pa dang con e con du pel wa sho pa den la me sha pe den pa dang ka nyam yong la de shi jong wa dang ta shen ma lu so sa jip jane nyo tu san je sa la ke ba shu